One of the largest crocodiles reported to exist is claimed to be 50 feet long and in the Congo. It's called the Mahamba, and it's an interesting case because instead of it being claimed as one large individual crocodile, it's supposedly its own separate species from the other crocodiles in Africa. I've made a couple of videos about these crocodiles before, but some new information I found has made me want to discuss these giants once again, mainly because one report has photographic evidence and all these new claims have legitimate implications about the known crocodiles that live in West Africa. The origins of the Mahamba begin with some claims John Reinhard Werner made in his book from 1989 about his adventures in the Congo. Werner claimed that while traveling in the Congo, he saw many crocodiles that were anywhere from 40 to 50 feet long. He stated that he got his measurements by comparing the crocs to the boat he was on, which measured 42 feet. Beyond just seeing these creatures from afar, Werner experienced two up-close encounters with these giant crocodiles. The first was when he saw a crocodile he estimated to be 50 feet long with a back said to be 4 feet tall while duck hunting. However, this crocodile was soon scared away after Werner fired a shot with his gun at a duck. The second encounter was when a crocodile estimated to be 40 feet long was hit by Werner's boat, but the crocodile seemed to have not been injured by the collision. Werner's reports of these 40 to 50 foot crocodiles in the Congo led Roy P. Mackle, a biologist interested in cryptids in Africa, to ask locals about reports of giant crocodiles in the area. This is when locals stated that a large species of crocodile, known as the Mahamba, lived in the area. Like the crocodiles we know of today, the species lays eggs on land, is carnivorous, and is known to attack people. The one interesting detail Mackle got from the locals, though, is that these creatures live in tunnels and caverns anywhere from 50 to 1,000 yards long. Several species of crocodilians do make burrows, so the fact the Mahamba makes these caverns isn't too surprising, but the 50 to 1,000 yard claim is really interesting. Mackle released his findings in his 1987 book about cryptids, A Living Dinosaur, but nothing else about these giant crocodiles have been uncovered since then. However, I've recently found some interesting claims of very large crocodiles not only in the Congo, but West Africa in general, and they may give more context to these Mahamba claims. In the early 1600s, Richard Johnson in his book describes seeing one extremely large crocodile on a riverbank along the Gambia River, and was able to get the length of the crocodile after it went back into the water. When we have observed the print they leave behind them upon the soft sand, we have found by measure of rule his whole length from the point of his nose to the end of his tail contained 33 foot. The next report of large crocodiles comes from William Smith in his book from the early 1700s, which states crocodiles in Sierra Leone are generally from 20 to 30 feet long. After this, I found claims of more monstrous crocodiles around this time period in John Barbot's book, where he explains crocodiles 30 feet long exist in the Gambia River, and they can swallow a buck or a man in one mouthful. The next claim comes from Victor Giraud's book, which describes an encounter with a giant crocodile from the Congo in the 1880s, which is the same decade Werner saw his giant crocs. One morning, we came face to face with a monstrous crocodile sleeping 2 meters high on a slippery rock. Surprised, the animal jumped, but his foot was missing, and he fell abruptly into the water. 1 more centimeter, and he would have fallen on the canoe, sinking us. An illustration of this crocodile is provided in the book, and it's evident this picture is trying to convey just how monstrous this crocodile was. Of course, we can't really find the true length of the crocodile, given the fact this is only an illustration, but just for the fun of it, I tried to figure it out. It's stated that the crocodile was sleeping 2 meters above the water level, so I'll define 2 meters as this point to this point. Using this as a reference, it seems the image is trying to convey a crocodile of about 10 meters, or nearly 33 feet in length. Like I said, this is in no way concrete, but it aids in the fact that this crocodile was way bigger than what's expected for modern day crocodiles. The next and final report I will refer to is actually on the eastern edge of the DRC, but given the fact this is a giant still within the Congo and has photographic evidence, I really wanted to bring it up. The report originally comes from a book Cherry Kirton and James Barnes released in 1915, and the giant crocodile was seen in the Semliki River. As described in the book, a camera was placed from afar to photograph some crocodiles in the river, and the first saurian appeared. He was a big fellow, perhaps 18 feet long, and rested with his mouth wide open while the birds strutted all around him. Then another appeared, some 3 or 4 feet longer, then a third a trifle bigger yet. But all at once, the grandfather of all crocodiles emerged. He made those that were basking there look like shillings compared to a crown piece. He heaved himself up from the water on all fours, with his tail lifted clear and curving upward, at least 2 feet of space between his immense bulk and the sand. As far as could be judged, by comparing his measurements with objects nearby, he was close to 30 feet in length. The crocodile then basked for a few minutes and slowly got back in the water, disappearing. Cryptid would also state in his 1929 book that this crocodile was not an inch less than 27 feet. The photo shown in the 1915 book does seem to show a very bulky crocodile, as indicated by how low its stomach is hanging when it's high walking, but as for its true length, it's hard to say. Because this Goliath is farther back in the photo compared to the other two crocs shown here, but is still bigger in size, it does indicate this is the largest crocodile shown in the photo. However, I cannot really seem to guess the length based on this picture. My main two problems with this report are: 1. The birds in the previous photo seem to be in the same visual plane as the Goliath, which if that's the case, I would say this crocodile is much smaller than 27 to 30 feet long. However, I'm not even confident about this. It's because of my second issue. The pictures are simply too blurry. I can't even really get any detail as to how far this giant is from the other crocodiles in the photo, and until another picture is found or simply a clearer version is discovered, it's hard to defend or disprove this crocodile being as big as what's reported. After examining all these claims, I just want to mention that although the 40 to 50 foot crocodiles in the Congo are unique to this area, reports of crocodiles approaching 30 feet in length are found throughout Africa. As early as the 5th century BC, Herodotus claimed crocodiles could reach lengths of 25 feet or even more. In Tanzania, a 24-footer was claimed to be killed in 1903 by Hans Besser, and given the fact the animal was missing a quarter of its tail, its true length was likely around 28 feet. Although no evidence exists of this crocodile, Besser gave detailed measurements of this crocodile's size, particularly the length and width of the skull. Still, it must be stated it is likely that many of these reports are exaggerated. Almost all of these giant crocodile claims stated here are based on visual estimates, and nothing more. It is often really hard for someone to estimate the size of a crocodilian just by looking at it. As a person who works with nuisance alligators, I cannot tell you how many times a person will tell me the alligator they are having a problem with is this size, when in reality it's different from what they guessed. More times than not, the guesses they make are overestimates as well. Another example I can give is one Richard Freeman gave, saying, quote, "My colleague Dr. Lars Thompson was told by some hunters that they had shot a 35-foot crocodile in northern Australia. Dr. Thomas had the men show him the carcass, and it turned out to be only 18 feet long. The men had been quite sincere, but had not brought a tape measure with them." Given all this information though, it seems evident large crocodiles did live in West Africa, and this is actually important to know because this has some historical implications for one species in Africa. You see, for a long time it was thought that the Nile crocodile lived throughout most of Africa, but it was actually discovered that the Nile crocodile in West Africa are indeed a separate species, now called the West African crocodile, or Crocodilus sucus. One of the things that differentiate these West African crocs from the true Niles is that Sucus is smaller in size compared to Niloticus. It is often stated West African crocodiles grow up to around 13 feet for their confirmed modern maximal lengths, which is smaller than the 18 feet confirmed for modern Nile crocodiles. Until this point in my research, for the known species of crocodiles in Africa, only the Nile crocodile had claims of being 20 feet or longer in length. However, with these historical reports claiming crocodiles of 20 to 30 feet being so prevalent in West Africa, I was starting to wonder one of three things. 1. Is it possible the Nile crocodile historically lived in West Africa? 2. Is it possible the West African crocodile reached lengths of 20 feet or more historically? And 3. Is it possible these giant crocodile claims really indicate a separate species that grows much larger than the known species of crocodilians in Africa? To help figure this out, I contacted one of the people involved with discovering the West African crocodile as a new species, Matthew Shirley. When asked if the Nile and West African crocodile possibly share territory today, he told me that in terms of West African countries, Niloticus and Sucus both live in the Congo, DRC, probably Cameroon, and maybe Nigeria, but they don't live side by side together in the same habitats. In terms of other West African countries the Nile crocodile may have lived in, a skull from Senegal was found to be genetically typed to the Nile crocodile, but Shirley believes the skull was mislabeled and was not really from Senegal. Given the information Shirley gave me, it seems some of these reports I stated could have been Nile crocodiles, but others, such as Smith and Jobson's reports of 30-footers, could have only been the West African crocodile, assuming these weren't of another giant species. Shirley does believe that historically the West African crocodile grew to much larger sizes. An old hunter Shirley spoke to in Senegal told him that he once killed a large West African crocodile and that the skin of the crocodile was nearly 23 feet in length. Assuming the hunter was telling the truth, even if the skin was significantly stretched, this still indicates an animal that was way longer than the 13-footers we see today. Shirley even believes that individuals longer than 13 feet still exist, but are probably in more remote areas hiding. The unfortunate thing is Shirley believes these giants of the past are no longer here, as mass hunting has killed off the giant gene. From a historical perspective, it does seem that giant crocodiles were more prevalent in the Congo and West Africa in general. Were these animals obtained sizes of 30 feet or even up to 50 feet? That's hard to confirm. As of now, there's no real concrete evidence of any species of crocodilian alive today reaching 30 feet or more in length. In fact, the official record for the longest crocodile ever measured is this 20-foot saltwater crocodile from the Fly River of Papua New Guinea. In fact, there are only 3 crocodiles we know of that have reached a length of at least 20 feet with a good amount of evidence to back up their existence. I interviewed one of the men who actually helped measure this Fly River giant, Romulus Whitaker, and after dedicating a large part of his life to find the largest crocodiles alive today, he had this to say about how big crocodiles could get.
I would kind of guess that since we do have proper measurements of 220-footed Lolong and the oboe croc, that 25 feet is not an unusual possibility. I mean, that is definitely in the realm of possibility.
In my opinion, after looking at all these reports and contacting Shirley, I believe that these reports of large crocodiles in the Congo and West Africa are not a separate species. They are just really big Nile or West African crocodiles. As for their true sizes, it's possible these were animals exceeding 20 feet or even reaching 30 feet. But for the 40 to 50 foot claims, they seem too absurd to me. Even the longest extinct species have a suspected length of around 40 feet. So a modern species of 40 to 50 foot crocodile would be really surprising. Still, who knows? Perhaps one day we will get a proper photo of a giant, a huge skull, or even a live specimen seen in the Congo. Only time will tell if the tale of the Mahamba is as big as what's claimed. To learn more about the man you just saw, read the book Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. From his early childhood of catching his first snake to his time in India, learn the origin of one of the greatest naturalists alive today, written in an easygoing conversational tone with a fast-paced medley of personal experiences. Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll is a vivid tell-all memoir that offers an intimate, irreverent self-portrait of one of India's most eminent naturalists and conservationists. Covering the first 25 years of his life, the book delves into his fascination with snakes and his rebellious rock and roll-filled youth. Available on Amazon now in digital formats, with paperback pre-orderable now with release on November 5th. Link in comments and description to buy.
I came out with this book, and I came out with this title, Snakes, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, for several obvious reasons. I've been hung up on snakes since I was 4 years old. There's a picture within this book of me when I'm 4 years old holding a milk snake. My mother took that picture. And I was just so lucky that I had a weird mother who said, when I brought the snake home, she said, "Wow, how beautiful." How many mothers would say to a kid who brings a snake home, "How beautiful"? They would usually say, "Yeah, get it out of here." I mean, that would be the standard reaction. So from age 4 onwards, and she wonderfully would tell, we were living in northern New York State at the time, and then when we sometimes visited her sister, my aunt, in New York City and stayed with her, the main thing I wanted to do was go to the New York Natural History Museum and look at all the exhibits and the dinosaurs and the snakes, of course. So, that's how my career started. As far as the drugs are concerned, I was in the United States during the 60s, and I know there's a joke that says, if you can remember the 60s and you weren't there. Let me tell you, I was in the U.S. Army at the time, and I was sort of an anti-war freak. I didn't really approve of America and its adventures in Vietnam, and thousands, or I'd say close to 1 million people getting killed. So, I don't know, just experimenting with psychedelic drugs seemed to be the right thing to do at that time. And rock and roll, that's been in my soul since way back. In fact, my wife she's just, I forget something, which happens when you're 80 years old, you sort of have a bit of memory loss. And she says, you forgot that, but you remember every bloody song that you remember hearing from 50 years ago. And it's true, I've got a fantastic memory for all the songs that I heard way back when. So, a lot of my adventures are in this book, but it only covers the first 25 years of my life. So we've got 2 more volumes to go.